রিল্যাক্স রেডিও বাংলায় রিল্যাক্স রেডিও বাংলা
রিল্যাক্স রেডিও বাংলা সারাদিন সারাক্ষণ।
Hello, assalamu alaikum to all my viewers and listeners. Asha Horisha Bala Soin Shusta Asoin. Thank you for joining me on Our Voice with Amina, where there's no stigma, no shame. Today's topic is related to our previous episodes of Let's Talk with Hafsa Islam, where she talked about life in the UK not being a bed of roses. Through these episodes, Hafsa interviewed Fazana and her experiences of life in the UK. Fazana was a student in the UK in the early 90s, where she traveled from Bangladesh and she came to the UK to find a better life, to obviously study, to possibly work. However, her experiences were not as she had imagined, and probably not as anyone in the world would have imagined. So আমরা সিলেটি ভিউয়ার্স যারা আছেন গত 2 এপিসোড যদি আপনারা দেখছেন on Relax Radio, Let's Talk with Hafsa Islam, where tan episode on namasil Life in the UK is not a bed of roses. Ta'n interview horsla Fazana ta'n oila একজন স্টুডেন্ট আসলা early 90s ওর মাঝে তাইন বাংলাদেশ থাকি UK এর মাঝে আইসলা আওয়ার পরে তাইন তো স্টুডেন্ট হিসাবে আইসইন লাইক তাইন খাম করতা তাইন ফরিতা however তান লাইফের এক্সপেরিয়েন্সেস যেটা আসিল ইলা ওইছে না তাইন জেলা বাবসলা ওইব ইলা ওইছে না জেলা তান লাইফ বাদে একটা টার্ন নিছে ইলা তাইনও কোনোদিন ভাবছইন না আমরা কেউ ইমাজিন করতাম পারতাম না. So today's show, we will look at the wider issues and the challenges immigrants face in the UK. So Zara Bangladesh taki ein student visa or work permit or you know, beshibag in those situations. Amra dektam farize manche zela monokorsla easy takhbo ila auto easy oena. And how can we maybe as a community raise awareness and look at the wider issues, look at helping people as well if we can. So obviously student visa বা work permit আইতে হইলে একটা criteria থাকে, so তাই criteria meet হলে তাই আইতা পারবা, but of course মানুষের কোনো সময় একটা situation ফরতো পারে যে actually তারা লেখাপড়া করতে পারেন না ও কাজ করতে পারেন না, because life obviously আমরা যেটা প্ল্যান করি সব সময় ইলা প্ল্যান মতো চলে না. So join me after the intro break, where me and my guest will be talking about the wider issues and the challenges immigrants face and how we can support them. So we will continue the discussions after the break.
সকাল দুপুর সন্ধ্যা রাতে তোমার আমার কথা হবে রিল্যাক্স রেডিও বাংলায় রিল্যাক্স রেডিও বাংলা
রিল্যাক্স রেডিও বাংলা সারাদিন সারাক্ষণ।
Welcome back, dear viewers and listeners. So I sco amal loge asoin amar ekjon guest tainage waisla on some of my shows. His name is Voice of Reason. Voice of Reason, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you for having me on again.
No, thank you for coming back and giving us your time again. So you must have watched some of those episodes, or there was 2 episodes. Have you watched the episodes? Let's talk.
No. Yes, no, I did. And they were very. I think whilst it was sad listening to her story, but there was hope. I think at the end, to see how she could come out of those difficult situation. But I mean, I know you and I sort of discussed this before, but I just want to echo what you mentioned earlier on, that she was brave coming on and sharing her story, and letting us sort of know in terms of her challenges. And the sad reality is, of course, when we discuss this, that she's not the first and she won't be the last. But I'd like to say at least one good thing is that I would say she's one of the success stories.
Even through her difficulties, she's come out, sort of come out from it without too I can't say too much damage. Obviously, the damage is already done, but she's managed to make those negatives into a positive and made it work for her.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, I mean, I always sort of, say, through adversity, we become stronger. And it is. And a lot of the times, I mean, financial location, I say, look, you know, generally as human beings, no one is bad. আমরা পরিস্থিতি সময় না নিয়ে আমরা এমন জায়গা নিয়ে ফালাই, we are having to make certain decisions.
Absolutely.
And that goes on both sides, whether you're the victim or whether you're, and this might maybe a contentious sort of topic, but even if you're on the other side doing, the bad thing, if you like, yeah. I think generally as a human being, when you're born, you're pure, and as I mentioned, your situation sometimes, whatever the bad thing that you're doing,
Mm.
like for
And I
all.
suppose, yes, in certain lights and certain ways, yes, it's bad, but certain situations put people in those circumstances, put people in those situations. So do they really have a choice? Sometimes,
No,
yes, we all have a choice. Someone might argue, yes, you do have a choice. But realistically, if we look at a story and it's inspired by Fazana, if we look at that story, how many choices did she actually have? Because where she was trying to stay away and come out of it, um, her own friends basically landed her in trouble.
no, absolutely. Right. Look, so again, I think, and this is quite, I mean, look, you had a show a few weeks ago, I remember, and this was, I think, on autism and maze, Farhat Aslai, and your guest that you had on there, he mentioned that, Maslow's, the hierarchy of needs. And if,
Mm,
if you bring that back and you sort of put it onto the story that your guest Farzana, kita kuat saja.
mm,
Again, you look at mentioned basic needs, taha, hana, having a roof over your head, these basic sort of needs. And when you put those needs there, it is very much survival mode, right?
mm.
So, I'm not judgmental or anything, and I don't think anybody, unless you've walked on those shoes, I don't think anybody has the right to make
Right to
those
judge.
guitar. Right, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah. So again, going back to your point, what you mentioned, um, yes, I think situation and yeah, এমন জায়গা মানুষ পড়েন, they're having to make those decisions, and again, especially if you're coming from abroad, that support structure isn't there. If you don't have if you don't have
If you don't
family
have
members,
family and friends, we can consider ourselves really lucky to be, surrounded by family, relatives. Even the law and the government, there's so many forms of protection for us, and we then find that we're not in those situations. But even then, we have so much support. But what do we actually make out of it? There's
no,
a lot of people
absolutely,
supports that don't end up making a success story out of it.
yeah. I mean, again, look, in some cases, people actually end up far worse. And what I mean by that, they end up, especially if you're if you get involved with substance abuse, for example,
Yeah,
then it's very difficult to come out of that. you know. And my Sheikh Asuma, like I'm not only when we see somebody on the park bench, for example, who looks a bit like a rough sleeper, uh,
yeah.
Maud Khan, for example, right?
Mm,
And I know sometimes people have this really dim view that, oh, Maud good lagi, that's why he ended up on the street. The reality is, when you really think about it, people that end up on the street, তারা ঠান্ডার দেয় না নিয়ে, একটা সময় তারা মদ খাইতে বিরত, because that মদ
yeah,
খাইয়া নানি keeps them warm. So
yeah.
not everybody looks at the wider picture and looks at, how did this person end up there? Is
Mm,
it really to do with alcohol?
mm.
No, it's not. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is that, when you look at somebody, don't just make a judgment that easily.
Yes.
Until you walk their shoes, then I'm sorry, it's very difficult to
You
make any
can't.
sort of assessment.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
sort of in her story, she kind of talks about how there's people in power within the community and people with wealth who are also the people that exploit these women or exploited her even. So,
Mm.
how did you feel hearing that? That you know what, there's these bodies out there that are very respectful in the
Yeah.
community. There's nothing to fault them about. However, there is a backstory to it all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, look again. When I mentioned this in the beginning, right? I mean, the life of Islam Rani, her story isn't the first, and it certainly won't be the last.
Mm,
Similarly, those people that generally, I'm generalizing here. Those people that you're mentioning, um,
mm,
you know, they, they're not kitaba, just subscribe to a particular ethnicity.
yes.
That those traits don't, they don't discriminate, by occupation or ethnicity or race, religion, culture. You can see this sort of evident in in our societal structure. And what I mean by that is when you look at the politicians, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
isn't just, I'm not a Bengali politician. This is
Mm,
also, our white counterparts, if you like. Yeah, if you look at Tarar, the amount of kita control, those sort of behavior, and some of them actually, do you know what? They themselves then end up being kita found out. You know,
they
I
do.
mean, there's a show that I used to watch. It's finished now, The House of Cards. And honestly, if you watch that, and
Mm,
if you look at the society, the political structure, it's
mhm,
it's a reflection of what really how politics really is, and it's to do with serving your own agenda. And if you don't, if you can't serve your own agenda, then what happens? Or if you can't, serve the overall agenda, what happens is,
mm,
"Tara nani tumhare kita karbo, all your hobbies is they'll put it out on the media, yeah, and you get
of
found out.
course.
And
Yes.
if you look at some of the politicians, and it's happened to them. Like I remember there's a politician, Keith Bad, right? If you think
Mm,
about it, and this isn't nothing. It came out what he did, and I'm pretty
yeah.
sure he didn't toe the line, and that's probably obviously I'm coming across probably like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not naive, right? So pretty sure that this guy, all his life he's done something, and he didn't toe the party line, and all of a sudden they've exposed him.
Mm.
So 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 again, what you're saying to the, I'm not society Mazen and Yola, we've got these political figures, face value Mazen, they seem very respectful, very kita, main
I
chalahan
was
la kita
shocked.
rada deste.
I was shocked because obviously I'm I'm a baby in the media world. Okay, so I'm learning how to crawl. But when I heard all of this, and I was like, wow, because obviously she didn't name and shame people, but we do have a gist of what kind of happened and from what kind of um and I was genuinely shocked because I was like, wow, these people go out in go out in the world and they're like doing like big charity events, they're
Mm,
donating huge amounts of money in the name of religion. And the world sees them as this thing like, oh my god, this is the
savior.
best. That's yeah, such a they're not just moving forward themselves, but they're helping the community around them. Helping people in Bangladesh, be it building mosques, be it orphanages, be it water wells, all of those kind of things. But to then hear that they have this other side to them, it does really spook you out, because not in a million years, if I hadn't come into this world, would I have even dreamt about it.
So so what I will say, yeah, again, the the most common thing in terms of the kita is money, right? When you have
Mm,
money,
mm,
power comes along with it, right? And with money and power, there's responsibility, and this is why, Nani, for me, I talk about the spiritual connection a lot with a lot of people, right? Holding
mm,
yourself to account, because Erdin, dutin for or Erdin dutin, you leave this world, right?
mm,
Everything that you've done, ওটার জবাব সে ওটা দিতেই পায়, right?
of
And
course.
and that in itself, when you wrong somebody, when you exploit people, when you take someone's right away, How
mm.
will you on the day of judgment, Allah you're gonna have to you'll have to, get give
But it's
answers for
basic
everything you've done.
humanity as well. If we look at it from a religious point of view, of course, there's a different. All
Mm.
religions say don't treat people
Oh,
bad.
absolutely,
We
yeah,
all agree on that.
absolutely.
But let's, for instance, say let's park the religious aspect of it and just
Mm,
looking at humanity. If somebody is coming to you for support and for help, you don't just jump on it
mm.
and start, thinking, what can I get out of it? And also, when you exploit someone
So,
and you lead them into that way. So part of her story,
so
she said how somebody had taken money off her to get her a job. If I can get
yeah, and
somebody a
that's
job, why do I need to
so
charge someone
disgusting.
for it?
Honestly, that, and when I heard that, I just found that so disgusting. And the reality is, look,
And these
so
are
yeah,
our
Matra,
friends. These are
yeah.
friends.
So now I'm on Matram Rani, right? But then at the same time, I'm Quran is disgusting. But then at the same token, I suppose when you take, when you take a step back, I'm not justifying it, but then you think to yourself, well, hang on a minute, but what was their reality? Was maybe they were in a sort of similar
But
situation? I'm
somebody
just,
has to break that cycle, right? Just because I
yeah,
see
I think, but this
your
is where the morality
identity.
comes in, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, look, look again, on face value, when you say it like that, someone who took a commission from somebody, £300, right?
Mm,
You got to be morally bankrupt to do stuff like that, right?
mm,
Um, Again, I'm saying it quite candidly, but I don't know their reality, right? Because it could be one of they themselves were in a similar situation, actually, tara যদি করেন না, then, tara kita, they'll be out on the street. Again, I don't know the reality, but that's a possibility, right?
it
But
is a
but
possibility.
generally, but that's why if you hold yourself to account and if you actually live your life in the sense that what, আমি মানুষের wrong করতাম না, আমি মানুষের rights করে নিতাম না, then
Mm,
you know there's a thing called karma, right? And
mm,
you know th- the way you live your life, right? The way you are, wala
mm,
na ni itar mul fayada ibai. So if you're
mm.
good to people, you'll find that goodness will come
Goodness
back to
comes
you.
to you.
Yeah,
It does.
it does come back. I know it's quite a difficult concept for a lot of people to appreciate and accept, but
Mm,
it does, honestly. I genuinely believe in, that karma, yeah? যেটা করবাই
mm.
মানুষের লগে যেটা করবাই, যেটা ব্যবহার করবাই, যেটা চলাফেরা করবাই, this will come back. Yeah, যদি না নিন, তুমি যদি হলার নি মানুষের লগে বাদ, even কিতা বাদ ব্যবহার করো, কিতা তোমার এটা, আল্লাহ এক্সপোজ করে লিবা. Yeah, and I've
Mm,
seen it, চোখের দেখা। মানুষের না নি,
mm.
তারা, they, they act so high and mighty, kita, so they're pious, but then Nota chocolate
This
kita,
is what I
they
mean.
get,
This is the shock that came to me is that some
oh,
of the people in the community that we so
look,
we respect so much and we think so highly of,
oh,
these were the people that are ready
but
to exploit.
don't forget, when you look at, not, we don't have to go that far. I'm not
Mm.
Jimmy Savile, I'm not Shadabai, Jimmy Savile, Monasinity, yeah, Kitoilo, yeah, and, and again, he was like the patron saint, yeah, and then Maradha, Kila Tara Allah Bijot Horson, yeah, all that stuff came out, and guess what? Do you think the people in the media didn't know his dirty secret? You know,
No, it was a
just
group
like,
of them.
oh, of course it was. And not just that, but also if you even look at the recent media coverage around Philip Schofield, and again, it doesn't instantly, because you look at it, it's in the media, right? And then not and don't forget, I'm not, you know, His Majesty Prince Andrew, Hekita Kuidagesi, yeah, you know,
Mm,
so ita, I mean, the reason I'm mentioning these names for a reason, because
mm,
it's not just I'm not community matter. It happens
mm.
everywhere. It happens at
It does.
and
It does.
and
But we would hope that in our community and we, us being religious and having some sort of, cultural aspects to our lives, we would
but
help our
we
brothers and sisters that come and
yeah,
find themselves in difficulties, you know.
yeah. No, I think that's, but we're parking religion aside, isn't it? Like I'm trying to show Kitan, but what is the common trait you see amongst those three people that I mentioned? It's money and power, right?
How?
So when you're
That's-
exactly, and this is why, Nani, when you're in that position, Nani, and I'm just Nani, a lot of the times, Nani, people that have money usually have a platform, usually have a voice, right? And and the other
Mm,
thing is when you do have a platform and you get you have a voice, if you don't use it, if you go against certain people, then unfortunately, there's a backlash, and a lot of people actually, you know what, silently witness for Baita. Yeah, you know,
They
to
do.
silently witness. Yeah, they do because, and I understand, and you know what, I appreciate both. I mean, I'm sympathetic towards that because, you know,
Mm.
I'm just gonna mati. Then আমার ফ্যামিলির মাঝে তারা ইয়া কিতা গন্ডগোল করবো, yeah, you know, তারা
Yes.
আমার ফ্যামিলির মাঝে তারা হামলা করবো. So what do I do? You know, is it, you know, all I can do is lend a sympathetic ear and probably, you know, those fast one from the phone probably দিলাম charity মাঝে to just sort of help the cause. But you know, it's easier saying, you know, all this, but to actually, you know, there's a saying, isn't it?
Mm.
Put your money where your mouth is, and that's not easy, right?
That's
Especially when your livelihood is at stake.
Mm.
So,
Okay, we have
so
to take a short break. Sorry, we're going to take a short break and we're going to come back and continue our discussions. Viewers, please stay with me and we will be back after a break.
শহরের যান্ত্রিকতার আড়ালে সিলেট সিটির বাইরে ওসমানীনগরের উসমানপুর ইউনিয়নে কিছু প্লট ভাড়া অথবা বিক্রি হবে।
এই জমিগুলোর পাশেই পাবেন কেন্দ্রীয় মসজিদ, স্কুল, মাদ্রাসা ও ক্লিনিকের সুযোগ সুবিধাসমূহ।
কর্পোরেট কোম্পানির বিজ্ঞাপনের বিলবোর্ড অথবা বাড়ি তৈরি করার সুনির্দিষ্ট স্থান এগুলোই।
আজই ভাড়া নিন অথবা ক্রয় করুন আপনার কাঙ্ক্ষিত জমি।
মাদারবাজার, আজিজপুর, গহরপুর, চণ্ডীপুল, মাদারবাজার ভায়া মাদ্রাসা বাজার, মাদারবাজার ভায়া দয়ামের, ময়নাবাজার ভায়া বালাগঞ্জ এলজিইডি রোডের পাশে সিলেট ওসমানীনগর ময়নাবাজার সংলগ্ন রাঙাপুর গ্রামে ১৩ শতক, বেড়াখাল গহরপুর গ্রামে ১৬ শতক, ২৬ শতক, ৯ শতক ও ২১ শতক জমি ভাড়া ও বিক্রি হবে।
ক্রয় অথবা ভাড়া নেওয়ার জন্য আজই কল করুন অথবা হোয়াটসঅ্যাপ করুন 01714226528 এই নম্বরে।
Welcome back, viewers. So আমরা discussion আসলাম যে how people in power যারা power আছে কমিউনিটির মাঝে, যারা দ্বন্দ্বলত আছে, তারা ওলা মানুষরে তারা exploit করে নাকি, তারা advantage নেই। So আমার গেস্টর লগে মাথাত আসলাম। So voice of reason, if we go back to kind of people in power and things like that, these same people who exploit certain people, right? What we found then is that when they are getting found out, when they are found out, they then start rumors or spread rumors about this other person being the bad one. I'm sure you've seen that in the media as well with some of
oh
the
yeah,
names.
absolutely.
So when it's suddenly found out, it's no longer their fault. You know, it was the other person's fault.
It's a
And this is
strategic tactic.
exploitation.
It's a strategic tactic they deploy.
Yeah.
Look, again, this isn't new. This is something that has happened, kita, you know, way before time. And you look again, if you think about Kitaba, I'm not a few years ago when we had um, who's that Labour candidate? মাথা থেকে গেছে কিনা বুড়োই
Okay.
যেরকম তার নাম বুড়ি, you know, so we had that, do you remember that Labour prime minister kita, he stood for to be a PM, what's his name, Labour candidate.
Labour candidate. There were so many that came and went. I
No,
have
no,
no
no.
idea.
He was an MP. He was a
Yeah.
Labour. He's a candidate standing for the PM.
Okay.
Nambulis. But anyway, but they went. I remember the time, right? They were gunning for him. Right? He was standing for kita. You know, he was standing for the people in general, right?
Mm.
Mostly the poor people, right?
Mhm.
Your everyday kita, common kita person. And because the people at the top, it didn't serve their agenda, they were gunning for him. They were spreading all these rumors about him, kita,
Mm.
and so I guess what I'm trying to say, this is a tactic that they deploy,
I suppose
to
that's somebody who's trying
take
to get
credibility away.
power. However, what about the vice versa? So when those people in power are found out, what do? Oh no, it wasn't me. That person's blackmailing me, or that person is bad. Because they're bad, they're trying to drag down me or my company, and they didn't get what they want, so now they're ruining my name.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Again, that's a
again,
tactic. That is a tactic that, I've got found out. So how do I save
mm,
my skin? However, these people that exploited those people turn the story around and say, no, oh, ogulo ge solraini. Igu to zeba, dige to tahore, dige to tahore. And you just think, hold on a second. You were the one that exploited this person. How can you say that?
yeah, because you know that well, I would say kita আপনি কিলা জানেন in bad ও তো আপনি নিশ্চয় আপনি তানের লগে চলাফেরা করছেন এর লাগি আপনি কেন করানেনি you know
Yeah,
look
there's some sort of situation must have come about that
yeah
that.
and like
It's
yeah
amazing. Like, some of the stories that we heard, obviously, some of the stuff we couldn't air, we couldn't put on a
mm,
live show as such. But when you hear the backstory, you think, oh my goodness me, like this is happening in the world, like in this day and age, especially where there's,
mm,
there is a lot of awareness, the social media things. Before you've said something, it's already out on me.
yeah and
That's
look
how far.
again but this is why I go back to karma, isn't it? Yeah, look, and those people, they have daughters as well, right? You know, when you do wrong to somebody else, yeah, don't forget
Mm,
that you also have daughters as well, yeah, and you wouldn't like it if somebody did wrong to your daughters or your
of course,
sisters or
of
your
course,
mothers, you
of
know,
course.
and I said,
So like we have obviously our um what's it, the people in Bangladesh, they think, oh, sorry, life in the UK is a bed of roses and it's all
mm,
hunky dory. There's money, there's everything there. However, when they come here, they see a different story. So that's one part of it. That's part. However, what about the people in Bangladesh? Now, if we sort of start touching on the subject of like not just prostitution in the UK, but prostitution in Bangladesh, the specific areas, the specific villages or districts that are known to be the largest in the world, right?
yes.
Where children are being put into the business as young as 14.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And look, there is actually a district in Bangladesh, Rajbari district,
Mhm.
and in that district, I mean, there's a village, Dulatli, I think that's how you pronounce it. And Bangladesh. Just a bit of background, was one of the I think um, first Muslim country. Although they may not identify themselves as Muslim now, but first Muslim country at the time to legalize prostitution. Now, kita আমি এখানে কেন করলাম? Now again, so when they did that, that created a huge sort of business for them, opportunity for them, and it became more
Mm.
it became an avenue to, I suppose,
Acceptable?
to exploit. I'm not going to say it's acceptable, but it became an avenue to exploit people even more. And I remember
Mm.
watching this documentary not so long ago, and in that documentary, Nani,
Mhm.
there was this girl. Her father was in debt with somebody, and because he couldn't pay the debt off, he sold her off to the person that he owed the debt, and she was only 13 years old at the time. So what did he do? He
Wow.
took her, and then he took her, and then he sold her off in a brothel himself, right? And then um and then and that's how these people sort of find themselves in the situation. Like, can you imagine, can you put yourself in the shoes of that 13-year-old girl? What must she been
Yeah.
going through? My dad
It's
is
not
supposed to be
exactly a
looking after him.
choice that she made. Exactly, exactly. And the person that's supposedly your protector, the one person that
Yeah,
male person that unconditionally would love you and protect you, is then the person that ends up basically selling you. Is
yeah.
and we were
And
talking
then
about people in power and wealth exploiting women, but
mm,
this is your own family.
but this is where I said, is it my পরিস্থিতি না নিয়ে my situation নিয়ে ফালায়. So the father might say, actually, "Do you know what? I mean, all I foresee." And it's sad when I look at it, and সকল ভাই দেখার সময় দেখা লাগে. You have to take everything into consideration, and it's not everything is black and white. I'm not justifying what the father did, but Not everything is black and white. And I think it's when you look at the society in general, all I can say is the society is broken. The very moral fabric of society is broken, Nani. I'm not, Nani, we don't think about kita our neighbor or he or she, are they eating properly? How are they
Yeah,
eating? We live in a society where it's very much me, me,
it's
me.
selfish.
It is. It is. It
It's,
is so very much selfish. Because when you think about it, in a society, what kind of society are we living to allow that to happen?
mm,
Forget the father, but what kind of society are we living to allow that to happen? And then
yeah.
someone else to take that girl, little girl, and put her on business. I mean, I was going to be
Well, it's
because
money,
Bakagan
isn't
and
it? Money does all sorts of. Money is somewhat, well, not somewhat. It is the root of all evil.
it is if you're not utilizing it properly,
Mm,
এটা resolve দেওয়া লাগবে সকলটা. Especially with money. How did you
mm,
spend that money? How did you utilize that money? You know,
yeah.
and I mean, again, I was part of this kita charity line where we're trying to help kita. So you have kids obviously that are born out of these situation, right?
Born
Illegitimate
out of
kids that are
brothel.
born. Yeah, kita, they are byproducts. Now, well, তারা দোষ কি তাতে? They haven't done anything wrong. But guess
Yeah,
what? In the society, Nani, they're stigmatized. Yeah, there is a stain on them. So
of course.
the idea was the charity was going to look at those kids and how to uplift their life, provide them with education. Because look, in that village, those kids, Nani, they're just roaming around. There isn't
Mm,
any sort of education that formal education that they're
mm.
receiving. And
But there
you know,
is a
I
movie actually, and I do think it's
mm,
on Netflix. It's called Gangubai.
mm.
Gangubai was a big female mafia, but she went through that similar story
Oh
where
yes, I
she
remember
was
that.
sold
Yeah,
off. Yeah, she was sold off by her boyfriend at the time to a
mm,
brothel. And because she ran away with him, she
mm.
couldn't go back to her family. However, she then tried to turn that around where she did run a brothel. We know that she ran a brothel. Maybe it wasn't the right thing to do. However, what she did see is that if she didn't take these women in, they would be out on the street doing it anyway. But at
No,
least they had a roof over their head, they had food,
they were in
and any of
control.
the children born from those
Mm.
women went to school.
No, absolutely. I remember seeing it, and I think also the idea behind what she was trying to do is trying to gain back control, and everything was going to be on their terms,
Yeah,
effectively, and that's what I think it was trying to show that what situation it is what it is, but we're going to control the situation, and that's what
yeah. So
and that's
she's
what
taken a
they.
negative and basically tried to get some sort of positivity out of that negative.
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't condone that sort of business venture, but I mean,
No, but it is what it
I
is. She
wouldn't.
is in the
No,
business and she accepted
yeah.
she is, and those women are. However, how can we break the cycle or how can we make the
See, this
children's
is,
life
I think this
better?
is where you and I will probably sort of disagree because, when you accept, if you accept the situation rather than accepting it, because then you're letting the situation define you. So I would probably, and I always say this, I said, whatever we said, and you don't let that define you.
Mm,
Do so, again, and look, you can sort of criticize and say, well, actually, do you know what? You can say this quite easily. Your stomach is full of food anyway. You've got a roof over your head. You're not living
mm.
their life, and that's what I mean.
But
Sometimes,
because those women were already in the business, they didn't have a choice but to continue.
mm,
However, when they did have children, they protected them. I mean, in the movie, you can see, and this is based on a true
mm,
story, actually locked away one of the children in a cage so she's not sold or in going into the business.
mm. No, no, I remember, but yeah. So look, the story that you on the film on Netflix, it is very it's a reflection of society. It's a reflection of what really happened. Not
Mm,
so much in terms of her success story in building an empire like that, but in generally in terms of the backdrop.
yes. Yeah. So when we look at you know the children as young as 14 going into that. You said you were doing some work with charities and whatnot. So can you give us some insight on what that charity was about and what you were
Yeah,
trying to?
so unfortunately it didn't take up, but the idea was right is to set up school, well, to set up schools in Ohanarmaze and to help them get out that, like you were talking about, breaking that cycle. So giving them
Mm,
education, giving them medical health, because
mhm,
they don't have medical health, and you
yeah.
can imagine the amount of diseases that's flying around. But yeah, so and that's and that's what they were trying to focus on in getting mainly on education, because
Mm,
whatever you look at, when you look at education, is probably the most significant part that takes you out of that life.
mm,
And I,
okay.
kita,
But you say
Zaralugama.
that, but if we look at Fazana's story, she was actually educated in
Mm,
Bangladesh. She did her degree in, I believe it was computing or something
I
along
remember
those
it's
lines.
computer. Yeah, she specialized
Yeah.
in kitab. I think Microsoft. I think
Yeah.
2000
So
or
for
something.
her,
Yeah.
she was educated. She did have that
Mm.
skill set behind her. However, when she came into this country, that meant nothing.
So first of all, what I would say, her education took her out of Bangladesh. So if she wasn't, if she didn't have education, um, I'm
But
not.
then would she have been better off in Bangladesh? Life in the UK, not bed of roses, you know what I mean? So maybe if she hadn't come here,
Mm,
she wouldn't have had to go through that journey.
yeah, I mean, look, I suppose, then you, like you say, you asked the question, and it's a question, isn't it?
Mm,
How would her life would it have been in Bangladesh? I can't
mm,
answer that. But
mm,
she'll probably, and I guess we'll never know. You can have an idea. I mean, again, if you were to take Farzana 25 years ago, 30 years ago,
mm,
and you were to tell actually Farzana, do you know what? If you don't, if you go to the UK, or if you don't go to the UK, do you think your life would be better? She probably would
mm,
have said, actually, do you know what? If I don't go to the UK, my
mm,
life wouldn't be better. I need to go to the UK to make my life better. So
mm,
similarly,
mm,
I guess what I'm trying to say is, yeah, unfortunately, we just, this is, unless you live the life, you just
mhm.
won't know, because
Yes.
you can make a success story even from a really poor place,
Yeah.
and I mean, you've seen these, and it's stories, like, again, I think of Slumdog Millionaire, right?
Yes.
Um, Not so much, but at least it paints the picture that, like, Shoma, you can come from those sort of really harsh backgrounds, but
Yeah.
certain life events can then just turn your life around totally.
Mm.
So so yeah, so I think in Kitaba, in the case of
And
Farzana,
I
I
think
think
there's a misunderstanding of students, coming to the UK and thinking that I encourage it. I'm not trying to put anybody off. However, when there are some people that are just solely focused on, what, I just need to get to the UK, or I need to send my child to the UK, and once they get there, everything's going to be okay. You don't know what situation you're putting your child in. যে কোনো
yeah, I
support
think
নাই, real কোনো লেখাপড়া আসেনি. Is there yes, people come to the UK in the hope to earn money too. It's not just studying. If I say that, how many people out of 100 people, how many are really coming to study? They're coming in the
oh,
hope of a better life, a bit more money, and a job.
look, and again, there are Ainani, and I think your guest Farzana, she mentioned that, isn't it? So that even when she came in, why she said, I'm not going to lie, I came here because I'm a guitar, to get a better life. It wasn't because I wanted to study kortam, aru bhalo hoitam, but it's to really to work in guitar, and
Yeah, to
majority
see
of
if
the
I
people
can
that
make
come in,
something more
yeah,
out
and
of
because in America they call it the land of dreams, and this country isn't that far off from that notion. Now, so again, I think Manushya Ain is because of that. So I think, look, I think the government also has a part to play in this as well. They need to take
it.
responsibility for this as well, because when you know that Manush aida din nani, tara aida because ham
Mm,
korbar dai, right? But you're gonna turn a blind eye. Why? Because you get your fees, you get your, 'cause these colleges or universities, nani, tara fees fine, right? And these are
yes.
quite astronomical fees. And
They are. They are. And if you don't
and
pay £8,000, £9,000 every year,
no,
you then have to surrender your visa and go back.
yeah, they take it. So I think when you know that people are coming, and they're coming on those grounds, and you know that that's not the true reality in terms of what's happening. They're coming here to work. Then either you tighten the control in terms of, look, if you really, because we don't want things to be hard for you, right?
Mm, mm,
And then, like, again, going back to what you're saying, Farzana knew, would she have come to this country? So
yeah.
those students that are coming, because of economic reasons, তারা যদি
Mm-hmm.
দেখো, government দেখো, look, you're thinking you're coming here because you can work, but I can tell you, mate, you're not going to get any work here because we've got laws in place that won't allow you to work. Be like, yeah.
Mm,
So,
mm.
so it's best to save your money
Again,
and keep
it's
that.
very difficult, isn't it? That
Yeah.
either they
Or,
come with the pot of money and say,
mm,
this is my 30, 40 grand to support my fees. This is another
mm,
10, 50 grand to pay for my bills and for my rent. Unless they come with
mm,
that pot of money, they need an opportunity to work, to earn some money so that they
or,
can support themselves. But
or
it
something
needs to
else.
be some sort of, like organizations or something like that, that, you know what, we all come with a plan, and sometimes it
Mm,
doesn't work according to plan.
look.
That today a person from the UK could be made redundant or they lose their job. So what happens to them? Yes, they got the law, they got the government to support them. Now, I'm
Mm,
not saying, let them tap into the benefit system or anything like that, but there must be organizations and something out there that kind of protects them from being exploited in that way, because it's not just prostitution. If we look at some of these students are willing to work maybe like cash in hand for like £2-3 an hour.
so hey, I'm going to say something controversial now, yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, the government can tighten rules, but I also think the government can actually make things easier, right? Have
Hmm.
funding in place, yeah.
Mm,
And you mentioned, you're not saying that they should tap into the benefit. As a
mm,
higher rate taxpayer, I can tell you I have no qualms with that, right? I
yeah.
think that's why we pay tax, to take care of the less fortunate, right? And I
Hmm.
much rather the less fortunate tap into that resources, yeah, than the likes
Hmm.
of certain politicians, yeah, that
Mm.
take, look, think about what the Tarakita was, the expense claims
No,
for you, yeah,
absolutely. It goes into
yeah.
the
So
less fortunate.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
think about our UK itself. I mean, we were at an event yesterday where we're trying to raise money to feed children
Mm,
whose parents cannot afford to feed them, and they're in
mm,
this country. And we had some MPs from Bangladesh that were saying, hold on, this is a shock to our system that, what, we thought poverty only existed in Bangladesh. We didn't
you know,
realize that you guys had to do charity events to feed children here,
mm,
right? So
yeah,
if you look at it, the way I feel, yes, okay, the benefit system is there, and it is there to help the less fortunate. However, we have a need here in this country to support what is here.
yes,
Bangladesh should support the Bangladeshis of their country, the residents of their country. However, when they get in donations and things like that, where is it all going? Now, that can't also be
mm.
our problem,
This is where I sort of,
because we have to
disagree.
push forward with the UK moving forward. We can't have my
Mm.
neighbor or a child going hungry.
What I say before any races, yeah, the only race, I always say this, the only race that really matters is the human race, and you know, and when you start thinking like, we have to take care of our own first, and this is where you sort of get that divide gets created. Look, I know it's a bit of a philosophical point, but honestly, I think it is. When you start just thinking about us, or I'm not the other Shamanish. But when you start thinking, you know, kita, human beings in general,
Mm.
then I think only then we can sort of
But
start to sort of
we
eradicate.
can't. Unfortunately, if we're looking at reality, we can't. So
But
therefore, we're better off
then we're not going to
focusing on
break the cycle, isn't it? But then we're not going to break the cycle, are we?
no, but then it's up to the Bangladeshi government to support the Bangladeshi residents where they find support, how they put
Yeah, but
laws
then
and regulations into place.
well,
That should be
yeah, but I mean, again, look, but they'll say we don't have. I'm not the sure that we don't have resources. I'm not the garib.
there.
How can we help our kita citizens. Yeah,
It's fair enough.
but
Then we have the organizations
but
that
at the
work
same
with
time, look,
Bangladesh.
this is an open secret. Yeah? Bangladesh is second economy, really. Or I say runs on bribes. ঘুষের মাঝে সকলটা চলে, yeah.
Mm,
And for me, it was a shock to my system, yeah. পুলিশ স্টেশনে গেলে রিপোর্ট লেখাই দিলে ঘুষ দেওয়া লাগে, yeah. লাইনের মাঝে উপাইলে আগে যাইতিলে ও পয়সা তোরা প্রশাসনে দিলে আপনারা আগে নিতে কি পারবো. What kind of nonsense is that, right? But you know what? I mean, that might tell that I'm quite candidly, right? But then
mm,
the culture is such, yeah, that
mm,
the economy is based on gush now. Yeah, even the high
mm,
politicians, right? You
mm.
know. When I remember when I went in the 2004 flood and Taranani and the local MP Nani, he had got money for Shafai so he might distribute the Badai. And you know what
Yeah.
they were doing, yeah? Tarata kita basic necessities of the law is here. Instead
Mm.
of distributing it to the needy, the less fortunate people, yeah, those kita high profile people, they were selling it. তারা বেচাটা
But
তো
this is
মানুষের
what I
কাছে
mean. So Bangladesh
হুম,
does get that support, but at the top
তারা
level,
নিজে খাইলে
they,
হয় তাই না তারা তারা
exactly. So they're not ripping it down. So now, as citizens with
হুম,
UK citizens with not dual residency, but we've got
হুম,
the links to Bangladesh, and it's a
হুম।
close place to our heart. Do we then only like? Are we also responsible for Bangladesh, or is it just the UK?
Okay,
Like,
again,
if somebody
no,
comes here on a student visa or on a work permit and then they have no means and they don't have whatever, yes, we can focus on those people, making sure that they're safe and they're not going hungry,
mm,
right?
so
But what is Bangladesh doing then to support those students back? Because what happens is a lot of, and I'm going to say something that's
mm,
probably going to be quite controversial. A lot of those students will then turn around and say, I can't go back to Bangladesh because they will kill me. I need to become an asylum seeker. I need to do this. I need to do that. So then it comes down to Bangladeshi law. Hold on, what have you put in place to protect them? Whether it be being killed, whether it is that they get exploited and put into prostitution, or
mm,
used to
yeah,
traffic
so
drugs.
so I'm going to just stop you there. So first of all, when people usually do that, usually I'm generalizing here.
Mm,
A lot of the time when they do that, it's not because they're really afraid of going back to Bangladesh and political asylum. A lot of the times is because this is an avenue that might in so that they can stay here, they can get indefinite leave here. This is
mm,
what they do. So if you want to
mm,
stay here, because once you have indefinite leave or you become a citizen of this country,
mhm.
you're afforded certain rights and privileges. Yeah, one of
Yes.
them being access to benefit and things like that, right? So
Mm.
that's why ila khoroy, um, kita. So I don't think it's what Bangladeshi government can do. But then they'll argue and say, what are we supposed to do? You know,
Create opportunities for people, create businesses, create studies, education, all of those kind of things that we
yeah.
have here. I mean, you can basically copycat the system here and do it over there to make life
It's
better.
not that look. It's not that easy. Look, America is trying to get that. If you look at the Americans, I would say the system that we have in the UK is far more caring than the system in America. Right? If you look at
Mm,
their healthcare, Danny, it's falling apart. Tara is if like if you're less fortunate, you're not going to be able to get get good healthcare.
mm,
Look again. You mentioned kita what is the government doing to help you. Like I remember I was talking to this PhD student, right? She was initially from kita Indonesia, right?
mm,
So she came to this country. She just a bit of her backdrop story is she came to this country to do a master's and then to do a PhD, and she did. She went to a very kita high profile university. Her country, she came on a scholarship.
mm.
Now during COVID, her scholarship kita funding had just finished. She
Okay.
was stuck in this country. She
Okay.
had no money for rent or anything. Now, how did she survive? She had to go to food banks. She had to go to the mosque money, yeah, and the mosque money had to give. She had to queue up,
Mm,
and that's how her and her son would eat.
mm, mm,
And this is someone that's highly educated, highly kitanani, and comes from a country. I'm not going to say very poor because I think their country is a lot better than Bangladesh.
Developing,
Yeah, a lot developed than Bangladesh, I would say. Yeah, but even then, you know, kita, she was struggling. So
yeah.
again, it goes back to Nani, when you say Manchester Paristiti puts you in a different sort of situation, and and it doesn't, and it's also, I suppose, for us, it's quite telling that your life can change at any moment. Don't
Absolutely.
take don't take things for granted. And
Granted.
মানুষের মানুষের লোকে বাদ ব্যবহার করলে তোমার কাছে ফিরে আইবো. Now her case was actually, I think, quite fortunate that she didn't go hungry, because the food banks then they were able to give her her basic, fulfill her basic
Mhm.
necessities. And secondly, the mosques were able to also provide food for her. And I remember she was telling me it wasn't just her queuing up. There were so many students like that, because remember when COVID kicked in, there's a lot of people. If you're a UK citizen and you're working, you got furlough. Yeah,
Mm,
you got
mm.
furlough benefit and quite easily delayed to housing benefit shokol tanani. Yeah,
Yep.
and a lot of people, and you forget actually. Do you know what? But there are so many people out there actually that didn't have that privilege afforded to them, because why?
Mhm,
Because our British didn't lie, irrespective of
mhm,
however they came here.
mm.
And again, look,
So if
and
we,
COVID.
yeah, gone.
So I was going to say, look, again, COVID didn't, it didn't stop for anybody. It didn't discriminate, right? And Shokoltara stand still করে দিছে. And I remember, I mean, I remember at the time, even when you had pilots, um, they lost their jobs because no one was flying, and then they had to do jobs
Yeah,
like, in ASDA. Not that there's anything wrong with working in ASDA, but when you then think about being a pilot on a high six-figure salary, then all of a sudden losing that.
you
So
lose
again,
that.
yeah, exactly. মানুষের life changing to বেশি সময় লাগে না. Number one. Number two, নানি kita, at least those people নানি had a sense of some security, ওদের সাথে, because they were citizens of this country.
Because they were
Yeah.
citizens of this country. So if we kind of look at Fazana's story, how she came with a certain image in her mind, a certain way of how life will be, and obviously it didn't work out that way. However, she has then managed to turn that around, and she is now doing very well for herself. She's made a stand in the community where she's in lots of events management. She's got a job. She's got a roof over her head. So she managed to turn that around, and it was very fortunate for her. However, there's not a lot of people that are as fortunate as her, and they do end up still stuck in the system. Stuck in the
No,
system.
absolutely.
As you said, there was that one particular person that led her out of that life. And it does go to show how even in the bad world, when the bad world, you meet somebody who then becomes the good in you.
So I'm not quite on. So two things from the story here. So first of all, I just want to say it should be celebrated. Her struggle, Nani, and the way she triumphed and came out of it, and now, like, where she is, that should be celebrated and recognized. And secondly, I started this off with in the beginning. I said, মানুষ generally, তারা বাদ নাই, তারা বালাই. Yeah, it's just একটা সময়
Mm,
situation মানুষের বাদ পরিস্থিতি নিয়ে ফেলায়. And that
mm,
particular person that helped her, right? Although
mm,
he's from that world, yeah. Again, we don't know his story, yeah. And Balai মানুষের মাঝে আছে, right?
mm.
And it's good that it's good, and then we should also celebrate those stories as well. The goodness in people, yeah.
Yes.
Even on those world, and we shouldn't forget that, because এমনি সকলের যদি নানি আর সকল সিচুয়েশনে সমান paint brush you brush everybody with the same paintbrush,
Mm,
then
mm.
I think you just lose the very fabric of society and the caringness of human beings in general. You lose that, because then you just go walk around thinking, you know what, everybody's out to get you, everybody's out to get you. So in that,
Mm,
horrible time that she's had, I think, when you talk about that person that helped her come out, that
yeah.
gives, I think that gives hope to mankind in generally. I think in
Mm,
general it gives hope to mankind. Do you know what? গরুর মাঝেও মানুষ আসল আছে. Yeah,
yeah.
and that needs to be recognized, and again, celebrate those, those
Absolutely,
instances.
absolutely. And you don't know how and why. I truly believe that you come across people for a reason and you cross paths for a reason. And in her situation, yes, in the bad situation, she come across this person who then practically became her guardian angel and took her out of
Mm.
it. And she managed to form. Obviously, she had the drive behind her to succeed and do more. So then she succeeded, but it's that whole thing of like, yes, you cross paths with somebody today and you might not see the value in that today. However, 5 years, 10 years down the line, it might be that person has come to some sort of, um, not rescue, but some sort of goodness in your life has come from it. And you don't see it
Yeah,
at the time.
and nothing nothing in life is an accident. Allah and Imran mentioned Miladin and with other people. There's a, we may think it's coincident, yeah, but it's
Mm.
not. It's planned, yeah. Sometimes mentioned Miladin so that we learn, that manushkila. We learn things from them.
Sometimes it's a lesson and sometimes it's a
Yeah,
blessing.
absolutely. Yeah, but every lesson is a blessing because think about it. Every lesson is a blessing, yeah. Because if you know, برضو دي يعني, then قلنا ندوش خيا who should say, yeah, or
Mm,
دوش خلا then after is a blessing.
mm. And I
Unless
think
do
what
تقدر
I'm
دوش
trying
خلا.
to say here, what I'm trying to say here is that everybody has their journey. We shouldn't judge somebody based on their past experiences. We shouldn't
No,
judge
absolutely not.
on their present experiences and
Yeah.
whatever they're going through. They are on their journey. We don't know what shoes they're walking in.
Mm,
We don't know what the ins and outs of their lives. It is just what we see, right? So we
yeah.
shouldn't be a judgmental figure. There's only one uh one, not person, but an entity that we are judged before, and that is God. And that is it. Nobody else
Yeah.
should have a right in and say in that. So when
And,
we
and,
look
and,
at
unless you're the wife, yeah, because the wife always, or the daughter, because the wife and daughters always have a right to judge you.
a right to judge you, okay then. All right, we'll take that
And your
then.
mothers.
Well, I'm sure all your male friends are going to like love you for that comment. You've
It's
just
just fact.
credited a wife and a daughter being judgmental, so great. But yeah, if we go back to those experiences and stuff, like, we shouldn't judge people. We should
No,
allow
no.
them to speak for themselves, do whatever. And however, if they come to us then after their experiences in life, we shouldn't then push them aside and be like, oh no, igubala na, igubala manusha sila,
So,
igota, because maybe they've come out of it now and they do have
no,
other skill sets.
no, absolutely. Look, again, I mean, I remember, I mean, even you can extend this to even relationships now, right? And
Mm,
if Farzana is listening, one thing that I mean, Onulu Thorbanani is for her to continue with life in terms of even finding somebody and not to give up on kita, because আমরা ওলা, সৃষ্টি করা হইছে, that we need companionship. And, in spite of her bad experience, I would still encourage her to actually, do you know what, and find somebody, because you need that. As human
mm,
beings, we need that, companionship.
mm,
Because otherwise, it's like it's very lonely and depressing. And and this is nothing to be ashamed of.
mm,
Alhamdulillah, kita banay soin. And look again, I think I remember when you had your guest or Princess Jasmine, some of the
mm,
adversities that she went through. And
mm,
one of the things she mentioned is that, you need to heal, trauma, especially when, kita with trauma, nani, yeah? And when you do find that person, both, I think both husband and wife, will need to be kita counselors to one another, creating that safe sort of environment and space for them to, express themselves without the fear of being judged. Uh,
judge.
and this
And
is
they
and this
absolutely have a right to move on with their lives and, have
absolutely,
that happiness. And we shouldn't judge them based on their past experience,
absolutely.
and give people a chance to
Yeah.
come away. Because if we continue pushing them back, they're being pushed back into that box again. We're not letting them
Yeah,
break that cycle.
yeah, and again, it goes back. What kind of society are we creating? If you do that, what kind of society are we then creating? And we need to be mindful of that.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much. Let me just have a look at some of the comments that we've got. We've got Amina Islam who says, keep up the good work. We've got Little Nondi saying hi. We've got Rukia Khanum who's saying, that's so true. And Anika Islam, she's saying hi to us. So hello to everybody and thank you for joining us and in our conversations, and thank you for watching. Voice of Reason. So we have slowly come to an end of our show today. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your time and your opinions. Obviously, hopefully we've raised some awareness somewhere. And maybe if Fazana is watching somewhere, this was inspired by your story. So there's possibility that we might come back with another episode of this. And if you haven't watched Let's Talk with Hafsa Islam, where London is not a bed of roses, please watch them, see the story, listen to the story, and let us know your thoughts on that. So yeah, thank you for joining me, and until next time on Our Voice with Amina, where there's no stigma, no shame, only on Relaks Radio. We will be back next week. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
সকাল দুপুর সন্ধ্যা রাতে তোমার আমার কথা হবে রিল্যাক্স রেডিও বাংলায় রিল্যাক্স রেডিও বাংলা
Relax